Okay, creating your architecture design document. Again, you're 4 weeks away from doing your first demo. What I'm looking for here is to show that you've thought about your overall architecture and design, the fundamental organization of the system you're constructing, what attributes or aspects have priorities. In other words, it may have to, your key indicators may have to do with privacy. It may have to do with response time. At Pages, here's one of the lessons at Pages. If someone's typing on a keyboard, that character has to show up within a tenth of a second of hitting that key, or people will be very, very unhappy. If any of you ever tried to be typing on a system where you have a lag between when you type, it drives you nuts, doesn't it? And frankly, if you're a good touch typist, I'm a very good touch typist, it's absolutely maddening. In fact, I don't know what, I feel so bad that Apple's software quality has just gone downhill in so many aspects. My iPad, if I am on Facebook and I try to enter a comment on my iPad, I start to type and I start to get extra spaces when I type a space, and it does funky things with autocorrect, I mean beyond what autocorrect normally does. Or it'll autocorrect and I'll start to back up the autocorrect and then type what's correct, and it puts something entirely different in there. It drives me nuts. Anyway, but responsiveness can often be a key aspect. Security. I know one of your projects you talked about, you're sort of waving your hand saying, yeah, this would really be secure, we're not going to worry about it in this one. For game design, it's also going to be responsiveness. In other words, you can do, if you're doing, retro, 2D and so on, it's kind of like, yeah, it's sort of jerky on how it plays and so on. But if your responsiveness for any kind of game, action game, is too slow, people will give up in frustration because, like, okay, tried to go left and it kept going straight, and it finally started going left and so on. What your fundamental choices of materials and location are. In other words, here's the technologies we're using, this is why we're using it, here's third-party libraries or products, here's what we're trying to create. Tom Affinito, who was one of the trainers when I went through the Intelligent developer training far too many years ago, 25 years ago. He and I were talking about architecture. That's when I was chief architect at Pages. We're looking at porting over Intelligent. And I talked about the importance of architecture, and his comment to me is architecture is a political act. As a chief architect, you have to enroll everyone in your vision. And you have to sort of negotiate some things. You have people who will say, no, I think it should work this way. And you have to find the way to either incorporate what they're saying or to talk them down off the ledge. It is a challenging thing. This was something that, actually that I was very good at. This is probably one of the things I'm proudest of at Pages. I did a great job as a chief software architect there. It was not easy. I had a bunch of very bright, very talented developers, some of whom had very, very strong ideas of their own. And I spent a lot of time not saying I'm right and you're wrong. I spent a lot of time listening to them and trying to basically, to use touchy-feely words, enroll them in the vision of what I was doing and tell them about the trade-offs that had been judged and so on. And I would incorporate, if they had suggestions that were useful, I'd incorporate them. It's not only a political act, you have to not have too much ego involved. But again, your goal with the architecture is conceptual unity. To be architectural is to be the most abstract depiction of the system that enables reasoning about critical requirements and contains all successful refinements. For the purpose of this, what I want is a box diagram. Here are the major components of the system. here's how they talk to each other, here's their relate, and here's part of you. A lot of you have already done this because I emphasized Conway's Law early on, and your org charts are actually, in many cases, probably a direct reflection of your architecture. But I would like to see thoughts about why, well, as it says, correspondence between the system requirements and the elements of the system. So a top-level design, I'm not looking for a lot here, other than to show that you've thought through what you're building, what your trade-offs are, why you've made certain decisions that you have, and how this carries through to any design decisions, and ultimately the implications for your implementation. And I'll get the slides and everything up, probably today. So, what your architecture should include, the things that you're trying for that will draw your customer in, because ultimately that's what matters. The what, your top-level design with major subsystems and interactions among them. I'm emphasizing that because I have occasionally gotten architecture documents that really don't have any software architecture in it. A brief, this is fairly brief, but your explicit choices and trade-offs in technology approaches and feature set. In other words, you should have some level of reflection of, this is how we're building it, this is how we plan to implement the architecture, and this is why we made the decisions we did, as opposed to the other decisions. Some of you actually already have this in some of your requirements documents. You reflect some of this information. Feel free to copy stuff. You know, feel free to look at your org chart and say, yeah, this actually, if we take the people out and put some other things in here, this is our architecture, this is our high-level design. That's fine. You want them to correlate. And then, in talking about both your architecture and your choices and trade-offs, why you think that will meet your customer delight. Why you think people will like what you're trying to build because of those choices. Design specific solutions in implementing architecture. You know, just sort of wave your hands. I don't expect you to spend a lot of time. Let me put it this way. The more time you actually document design, the easier time you will have in implementing all this. Because the better your architecture and the better your design, which basically says, this is how we're translating the architecture into implementation. This is your roadmap. The easier it is to hand this to your team members and have them code the right thing. One of the complaints I've had in past semesters is about developers going off to, and then coming back and developing and coming back together and finding that what you either have duplication, you have two developers basically working on the same thing, or you had disjunction where you have the developers bring stuff back together and it doesn't work together because they did not have a sufficiently unified understanding of the architecture and design to build things that would plug and play. So think of this as a document that you're going to hand to developers that if your developers couldn't talk to each other for a week, that this would basically keep them on track. So, purpose of, brief description of what it is, overall view of the system architecture, some of the divisions, the front end versus back end, data, database, specs. If you're doing game design, what that has, and the details to allow implementation from the design. And note this last item here. This is something I really want to see. Identify your hard problems up front. That's going to be one of our future readings. I'll get to you in a second. Identify your hard problems up front. Some of you have started to do that in your status reports. That's outstanding. That's where it should be there. But here in this document, say, here are the 3 or 4 hardest things that we're going to face in building towards our first and second demos. Yes?
So how do we find a balance between trying to design beforehand, before we start coding, and understanding that the coding process is a process of discovery, and therefore we can't know everything beforehand?
That's actually a very good question. What you can basically do is say, do a first pass cut as far as saying, in doing each of these subsystems, this is what it should do, and try to think of it in terms of a spec that you would hand to a developer who is working in, say, Iceland. Except you won't necessarily need to be that level of detail, because hopefully you have communication. But enough to say, it's a way to capture stuff to keep you guys synchronized. So you're not all sitting in the same room. You're not, a lot of you don't see each other all week long outside of this class. You want documentation that will help you. And this is actually a good way for all of you to contribute, because if you know how you're breaking it up, if you've got an overall architecture design, then one of the assignments I give each of the team members is produce design information for your section. And then everyone review it. Look at it all together, bring it together for the document. Everyone review it and say, oh wait, I didn't know we were doing that. Or, oh yeah, now I see this. Or, this is what I'm expecting and I need this from you. It's like, okay, we'll throw that in there. So this is sort of the last final step before you're sort of, foot to the pedal programming. So your assignment is to create and upload your initial architecture and design document. Again, this can be a living document. Should be on your GitHub by Saturday at midnight. Monday, I'm going to ask the chief architect for each of your teams to stand up and talk about your architecture document. We'll bring it up here, scroll it through, and I'm looking for 2 to 3 minutes. I'm not looking for a long discourse. We have 13 projects. How many projects do we have? A lot of projects. 16 projects. So that's that. Don't forget your status report and your podcast. Don't forget your readings for next week. Any other questions? If not, we are done.